Europe correspondent Mary Guerin there. Well, the Productivity Commission has recommended that Sunday penalty rates for retail and hospitality workers should be brought into line with the lower penalties paid on Saturdays. Business groups argue Sunday rates are an extra cost burden, but unions are fighting against the move.
Two of Australia's largest unions have commissioned research showing the major economic impact it would have on regional communities. For more, we're joined by Gerard Dwyer, National Secretary of the Shop, Distributive and Allied Employees Association. Isn't this change, this recommended change, just a reflection of a changing society, a modern society?
No, Ben, not at all. In fact, there's been very little change with regards to the numbers of people who work on weekends. In the past 15 years, it virtually hasn't moved. So we still have about 70% of people who work Monday to Friday, which means weekends are still different. The community is telling us through this report and through comments through the media that they still regard the weekend as something different. And what we're saying is that it's low-paid workers who are serving us on weekends. Those people who work in hospitality and in retail, they're giving up their time on weekends to serve the rest of the community, and penalty rates have always been compensation for working unsociable hours. And we've got a particular problem with the Productivity Commission assertion that we're going to somehow have a two-tiered system with retail and hospitality workers being somehow treated as second-class citizens. It's something that the SDA and United Voice certainly aren't going to stand for.
Sundays and Saturdays, sorry Miriam, what's the difference between Sunday and Saturday in 2015 in Australia?
Well, we did some qualitative research in addition to what the McKell Institute did using ABS figures. They also conducted a series of interviews with people right across the country, and it was a very clear message that both young and older people still see Sunday as something different. That is the day that still dominates in terms of, be it family get-togethers. For the younger ones, they might like to chill out a bit more on Sunday, but I think you only have to look at how we schedule our sporting events, and they are predominantly on the weekend, where most people are actually using their leisure time. But Sunday is still regarded as very much a family day or a day to spend with my friends.
But what if those businesses, particularly small businesses, where this is seen as a real cost burden, they're tossing up between whether or not they can actually afford to open if penalty rates continue as they are?
2 points there, Miriam. In terms of afford to open, the evidence that we see, both anecdotally and also across the industry as a whole, is that the cafes and the shops continue to be very busy on Sundays. I just go back to Easter this year, where the employers tried to run a campaign, particularly in hospitality, of putting up notices about we're unable to open or we may not open. It was a complete flop. In fact, I went out in my local area on Easter Saturday and Easter Sunday, and on the Sunday I couldn't even get a table in one of the cafes. So I think we need to be very careful. That campaign was seen for what it was, and that was it was just a whole lot of rhetoric. The fact is, and some retailers were telling us, that Easter was actually better than Christmas for them, and that's not just weekend penalty rates, they were public holiday penalty rates, and still business was booming. And that's the thing I think business is missing. They want to be careful what they wish for in this. This is about reducing the take-home pay of low-paid workers and their families, and that's going to have a negative impact on economic activity. And that's what the McKell Institute shows. This is going to drag hundreds of millions of dollars out of regional Australia in particular, but the cities aren't exempt. So we're going to have working people with less to spend. And in a consumer-based economy, that just makes no sense, no economic sense at all.
Why is regional Australia hit so hard?
What the report looks at is who owns the businesses. And when you move into regional Australia, we have particularly in retail, you have a lot of companies, big chains, be it in fashion, food or hardware, whatever, they're headquartered primarily in Sydney and Melbourne. So if you have a reduction in take-home pay in those communities by virtue of reducing penalty rates, that money then transfers back to Sydney and Melbourne. And quite frankly, I don't think regional Australia needs that at this particular point in time. People in the regions already get paid less than people in the city. I mean, the SDA, for example, is a very big union in regional Australia, and United Voice has a strong presence there as well. So we're connected to the regions, and we understand what's important to them, and for them to take a cut in their take-home pay, it's just not good for them, not good for their families, and not good for those regional economies. It just doesn't make sense.
We've been actually calling for comments as well from viewers this morning about this particular issue, and a number of those who've responded have pointed out that for people who tend to rely on weekend work, particularly Sundays, if there is a change, they may in fact have to look at finding a second job on top of that. I mean, it will cause a real strain for some people.
Absolutely. And Miriam, it's not just a second job. For some people, it's a third or a fourth job. And the interesting thing is, in some of those qualitative surveys, what would people have to cut back on? Often coffees, takeaways, the sort of things that the businesses, the very businesses that are calling for this, are cutting their own throat. Just doesn't make sense.
Gerard Dwyer, thank you very much for talking.